The lock on the case clicked open a half-inch when the stagecoach jolted hard, bouncing over something sharp. Eliza Merritt's fingers shot to the latch before anyone could notice. Her knuckles whitened as she pressed the lid shut again. The air inside the cabin was thick with dust and heat. But it wasn't sweat that dampened the back of her neck. It was the thought of what would happen if the case fell open. She didn't breathe easy again until the coach creaked to a full stop. Outside, Saddle Ridge looked as dry and dead as a snake's last skin. No grass, no shade, just heat bouncing off rusted tin and worn clapboard. Her boots hit the ground and kicked up red grit that coated the hem of her dress. She tightened her grip on the handle of the case, refusing help from the driver's reaching hand. Someone had drawn a crude star in the dirt near the deep pot. Its edges were too clean for a child's game, too sharp. Eliza didn't look at it long. Jack Calder stepped down from the boardwalk with that wide-shouldered gait common to men who'd lost too much to speak fast. He wore a work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, dark from sun and dust, and a revolver slung low on his hip. Not for show, his eyes, gray as storm-washed steel, flicked to the case first. "You Eliza?" he asked. She gave a single nod. "Yes. From St. Louis." It was close enough to the lie in the letters. "I'm Jack," he said. "Stage made good time. Your room's above the Mercantile." She took a half step back when he reached for her luggage. "I've got it," she said too fast. He paused, hand still extended. "It looks heavy." "It is." She forced a smile. "I prefer to carry my own things." Jack studied her. Not just her face, but the way she stood. He didn't push, just tilted his hat back and said, "This way then." Eliza followed him down the street, counting steps between the uneven boards beneath her boots. Every window they passed had eyes behind it. Women holding curtains back with ringless fingers, men resting hands near doorframes where rifles might hang. A boy spit into the dust and stared at her with the solemn hatred only children could wear without shame. The town was smaller than she expected. One saloon, one church, one jail, a mine office, and a boarding house sagging with heat. And just beyond the last row of buildings, the desert opened like a mouth waiting to swallow anyone foolish enough to walk alone. Upstairs at the Mercantile, the room was plain but clean. A bed, a chair, a table, a basin with a cracked mirror. On the bed, a folded quilt. On the table, a glass bottle of water and 2 clean tin cups. She scanned the corners, the floorboards, the lock on the window. Every surface looked like it could hold a secret. Jack didn't step inside. "I'll give you time to settle," he said. "We can talk about the agreement tomorrow." She nodded. "Thank you." He placed a brass key on the table. "Eliza," he said before turning to go, "why Saddle Ridge?" Her throat caught. She had an answer rehearsed, soft as lace. "I was a school teacher," she said. "The family I worked for moved. I didn't want to follow." Jack looked at her like he could see through silk and bone. His silence said more than words. Then he nodded once. Fresh starts make hard ground. When the door closed, she waited for 3 full breaths before moving. She knelt by the bed and slid the case out in front of her. With shaking fingers, she opened it. The scalpel still gleamed like it remembered blood. So did the forceps, the curved needles, the small bone saw wrapped in cloth. She touched none of them, just stared. One of the instruments, her old clamp, was stained. She had cleaned everything before she left Boston, scrubbed for hours until her hands bled. But this one bore a thin, dry ring near the hinge. It wasn't rust. She snapped the case shut and pushed it under the bed. Then she stood, shoulders rigid. From the street below, someone shouted, "Marshal! Out back! It's him!" Then came the gunshot, one, then another. Screams followed. Eliza moved to the window and saw men running. Some away, some toward the sound. A body crumpled behind the stables, half hidden behind a water trough. And in that moment, she realized something cold and final. No one here would be safe for long. Not even her. Not even close. She turned away from the window, her stomach hard as iron. She reached for the glass of water on the table, but didn't drink it. Her fingers hovered near her throat, then dropped behind her on the bed. One of the quilt corners had flipped back, revealing the inside lining stitched with initials not her own. B.H.A. That wasn't part of the Mercantile supplies. She hadn't come to be known, but someone already knew. She turned the quilt over fully. Inside the fold, tucked barely visible, was a torn scrap of envelope. The Boston postmark was smudged but clear. Her heart stalled. The gunfire outside faded. The town resumed its quiet. The kind that settled not because peace had returned, but because something worse had gone underground. Then came the knock. Not at her door, at the back of the building. 3 taps, paused. 2 more, rhythmic, intentional. Too familiar, she didn't breathe. And then, faintly, the scent of clove oil, from under the door. She hadn't opened that bottle since the trial. She backed away, slowly, silently, but the taps came again. 3, 1, 2. Same pattern, same ghost, same past. No one here knows I was a doctor. Let's keep it that way. Eliza didn't sleep that night. She lay stiff in the narrow bed, watching the moonlight crawl across the ceiling like something hunting her. The case under the bed pressed upward into her mind with every breath, and the knock. Those 3, 1, 2 taps, so deliberate, so wrong, echoed through her chest long after silence returned. She hadn't opened the door. She hadn't dared. But she hadn't forgotten either. At sunrise, she dressed in gray calico, pulled her hair back into a no-nonsense bun, and buttoned her boots like armor. She left the quilt folded neatly at the foot of the bed, though she couldn't unsee the stitched initials, or the scent that still lingered faintly in the room. Downstairs, the mercantile was just waking, shelves lined with canned peaches, pickled beans, salt pork, coils of rope and nails, a wall of tobacco and tins of snuff. A register the size of a tombstone sat behind the counter. A bell jingled as the back door opened. A woman entered carrying a shallow basket of eggs and a tin of fresh butter. She wore a linen skirt with the hem dark from dew, and a kerchief around her thick braid. Eliza stepped back slightly. The woman's eyes flicked to her. Sharp, assessing, not unkind, but not curious either, familiar almost, like she had already decided something. Marisol Reyes, the woman said before Eliza could ask. I clean. I cook sometimes. I don't gossip. That's good, Eliza said, instantly unsure why she said it. Marisol's gaze swept over her. You don't lie with your eyes, but you do with your shoulders. Eliza blinked. Excuse me. You stand like you're waiting to run, Marisol said plainly, like a horse still hearing gunfire. Eliza swallowed hard. I'm just adjusting to the heat. Marisol let the corner of her mouth turn up slightly. She set the basket down on the counter and turned to go. As she passed, she said softly, That case under your bed. I'd keep it locked. But not too far. And then she was gone. Eliza stood frozen, her pulse pounding in her ears. The dust in the shop smelled faintly of cedar and kerosene. She didn't move until she heard Jack's boots on the steps outside. He came in with his hat under one arm, eyes scanning the store. Mornin', he said. Hope the room suited you. It was clean, she replied. He gave a small nod. This town, folks watch what they don't understand. You'll feel it. I already do. Jack gestured toward the front of the shop. Walk with me. She hesitated, then nodded. Outside, Saddle Ridge looked like it hadn't changed in 20 years. Same warped boardwalks, same stubborn wind, same dust chewing at your ankles like a stray dog. But now Eliza saw the things that didn't show in a letter, the guarded looks, the narrow hands on hips. The way a drunk was already asleep outside the saloon, though. It was barely past 7. They walked past the blacksmith's. The clang of metal rang out behind the barn like a bell with no chapel. There's not much here, Jack said. One church, no preacher right now. One doctor, getting slower by the week. Schoolhouse stands but no teacher since March. You said in your letters there was need. There is, he said, but need don't always mean welcome. Sometimes it just means tolerated. That stuck. Eliza didn't reply. They stopped outside a pen where 3 pigs rooted through a trough of scraps. I meant what I said, Jack said, watching them. 3 months. Then we decide. You walk, I pay your fare. No strings. No shame. Eliza looked at him fully. The lines around his eyes were not cruel, just worn. You really think this could work? She asked. I think I'd rather try than grow old wonderin'. It was almost kind, almost, but before she could respond, a door slammed from across the street. A man stumbled out of the saloon, already half drunk. His coat hung open, boots unlaced, hat missing. He staggered toward the middle of the street and locked eyes with Eliza. Well now, he drawled, slurring. That the new male bride? Jack stepped slightly in front of her, saying nothing. The man squinted. Don't look like no teacher I ever had. Looks like trouble. Eliza didn't flinch, but her jaw tensed. The man snorted and kept walking. Jack waited until he'd passed. That's Garrett Hale. Owns 3 mules and no sense. I've dealt with worse. He gave her a look, but didn't press. They walked back in silence, near the mercantile steps. A little girl in braids was crouched beside the trough, poking something with a stick. Eliza stopped. It was a crow dead, but not from heat. Its chest was ripped open, wings pinned with nails to the trough frame. A thin trail of blood had dried into the wood. Jack cursed under his breath and pulled the girl away. Eliza stared. That wasn't the work of nature or accident. That was a message, a hard clue. She turned her head slowly, scanning the rooftops, the alleyways, no movement. Kids get into things, Jack said too quickly. Kids don't carry nails and a hammer. He looked at her then, really looked. I don't want to ask what you've seen before, he said. But you see more than most. I don't want to ask what you're ignoring. She answered. He didn't deny it. Back upstairs. She locked the case again, then moved it from under the bed to the wardrobe. But the air in the room still felt wrong, like something had been opened, and not closed. At noon, she walked alone down to the boarding house kitchen to offer help. Mrs. Connolly, who ran the place, gave her a task peeling potatoes, said nothing else. But when Eliza rolled up her sleeves, the woman stared. Her forearms bore thin, straight scars, surgical cuts healed long ago. The woman said nothing, but she looked. Everyone in this town looked at dinner. She sat beside Jack and across from a man with hands blackened from coal. He asked what she taught in St. Louis. She said, writing and manners. He laughed. Hell, manners won't save you here. No one else laughed. After dark, she sat on the edge of her bed, listening. The knock didn't come again, but something did. At midnight, a shadow passed her window. No footsteps, just a shape, paused, watching, then gone. She stepped to the glass, her breath fogging the pain. Nothing but the wide road and the dark, and the single nail left on the windowsill. Something in this town doesn't want her to stay. That woman's no schoolteacher, not with hands like those. Marisol raised. The next morning, the nail on Eliza's windowsill was gone. She didn't touch it, didn't speak of it. But when she rose and tied her hair back, she found herself glancing toward the sill like it might still be there. As if it had left a mark she couldn't see. Downstairs, Jack was already waiting. He stood outside the mercantile with 2 horses saddled and tied, one chestnut and one black. He wore the same dust-stained hat, his expression unreadable. Ride? He asked. Eliza hesitated. I haven't ridden much. He tilted his head. Plenty of space to learn. She didn't ask where they were going. She just mounted up stiffly and followed him out past the last row of buildings. Where the wind picked up and the dust thinned, sagebrush rolled across the dry flats like ghosts with nowhere left to haunt. The sun was already rising fast, white, hot, and high. They rode for 20 minutes before the sound of Saddle Ridge disappeared behind them. Jack slowed near a slope, where an old oak twisted against the sky. He dismounted and tied the reins loosely around a fence post, then waited for her to do the same. She slid down less gracefully, but kept her balance. Why here? She asked. He glanced toward the hilltop. Better to talk where no one's leanin'. Too close to their window. They walked a short trail to a low stone bench, half buried in grass and shaded by the oak's gnarled limbs. A grave marker sat nearby, worn and unadorned. The name is barely visible. Sarah Keldr, wife 1869. Eliza paused. Your wife? He nodded once. She died in the winter. Pneumonia. Fast. She sat beside him, unsure what to say. He didn't seem to expect comfort. I wrote you the truth, he said, looking out toward the open land. I want something real, someone to build with. But I know that don't come easy for most. Eliza looked down at her hands, folded too tightly in her lap. You want real. She said, but you brought a stranger from another state to live with you. I'd call that real brave or real foolish, or real desperate. Jack huffed a breath, not quite a laugh. He stood and turned toward her, more serious now. So here it is, he said. We've got 3 months. We act like it's real. Eat together. Work some. Meet folks. You get to see what this place really is. And at the end, she asked, if it fits, we marry, and if it doesn't, I'll pay your train fare to wherever you want to go. He said. No shame in it. No debt. No hard words. Eliza studied him. You don't strike me as the type to gamble on a woman you've never met. I didn't, he said plainly. I gambled on what you wrote. She almost smiled, almost. What if I didn't write the truth? She asked. Jack didn't blink. I'd say you're not the first. That landed heavier than she expected. They rode back slower. Neither of them speaking. The town came into view, just as the heat began to rise hard off the ground. At the stables, Jack helped her dismount without asking. You'll come to the Sunday supper at Langston's house, he said. Half the town will be there. Why? So they see you, he said, before they decide what stories to tell. She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. It made sense. A stagecoach bride wasn't just a curiosity. It was a story people would fill with whatever they wanted unless she filled it first. I'll go, she said, but I won't smile if I don't feel like it. Jack gave a slight grin. Good. They parted with a nod, nothing more, back in her room. Eliza opened the wardrobe and reached for the case. She didn't open it. Just touched the latches. The weight of it steadied her, strangely. It was the only honest thing she owned. A knock came at the front door downstairs, then another, then shouting. She stepped to the window, heart catching, not the pattern from before. This was chaos. 2 men were hauling someone down the main road, blood on one shirt, a third man limping behind, cursing loudly. Something had happened at the mine. She rushed down the steps and into the street. Voices were rising, people gathering. The bell at the edge of town started ringing. Fast, sharp collapse. Someone said at half moon shaft. Jack appeared beside her, breath short. They're bringing out the wounded. Panic surged through her chest. Eliza turned and sprinted for the mercantile. Inside, she dropped to her knees and yanked the case from the wardrobe. Her fingers fumbled at the lock, heart pounding in her throat. Behind her, someone stepped into the room. I knew it, said a voice low and firm. She turned sharply. Marisol stood in the doorway. Her face unreadable, a satchel already slung over her shoulder. I don't know what you saw before, Eliza said, but don't stop me now. Marisol nodded once. I'm not here to stop you, she said. I'm coming with you. They ran together down the street, past townspeople shouting and scattering. The air was already thick with smoke and sweat. Somewhere up the ridge, a siren wail of pain broke through the noise. At the mine, the ground was torn open. The wooden supports had caved inward. Miners were hauling limp bodies out on makeshift stretchers. A man screamed for his brother. Another vomited from the shock. Eliza didn't hesitate. She dropped beside the first injured man, blood pouring from a gash across his thigh, bone visible, the skin torn. She snapped open the case. Whiskey, she barked. Cloth. Water. Someone ran to obey. Jack arrived seconds later. He froze when he saw her. The case was open, the tools laid out in perfect order. She didn't look at him. Help me or move, she said flat. He dropped beside the man's shoulders and held him steady. The crowd swelled around them. Dark. Cook shoved through next, white-faced, panting. Eliza, what are you doing? What you can't, she said without venom. His arteries nicked. If we don't clamp it, he bleeds out. Cook knelt beside the next man. His hands shook. Eliza, he said, you take the leg. I'll do what I can over here. And just like that, the town saw it. Not a schoolteacher, not a mail-order bride, a surgeon. In the dust, under the sun, elbow deep in blood, and still standing, she worked without stopping, without apologizing. By nightfall, there will be no more secrets. Then came the scream that split the crowd. Someone shouted, Tommy Reeves! He's trapped. They turned as 2 miners stumbled from the smoke, one carrying a broken boy. Eliza stood slowly, blood on her apron, sweat in her eyes, and walked straight toward the next life that needed saving. Then came the sound no one in a mining town wants to hear, the bell. Tommy Reeves was 17, maybe 18, but in Jack's arms, he looked like a child, limp, dirt-smeared, his leg bent at a wrong, sickening angle that made one of the older miners gag when they saw it. A shard of white bone jutted from the thigh, glistening in the midday heat. His face was pale as flour, Mouth slack and moaning, eyes rolling back, clear space. Eliza called, her voice sharp as a whip crack. Now! Men stumbled back. A woman screamed behind her. Eliza dropped to her knees as Jack laid the boy down on a canvas tarp already dark with blood. She opened her case with both hands, snapping the latches, flipping the lid back to reveal rows of tools glinting in the dust. Choked son. The murmurs began immediately. God above. That ain't no sewing kit. She's not. She can't be. Is that a bone saw? Eliza blocked them out. Marisol, I need clean water, and strips of cloth. Big ones. Marisol was already moving, shouting orders in Spanish to the wives watching from the ridge. Agua! Retrapos! Ahora! Dr. Cook hovered nearby, out of breath and visibly trembling. I'll take the man with the head wound, he said, forcing his voice steady. Good. Eliza replied without looking up. Keep him breathing. I'll handle the leg. She poured whiskey over her hands in the wound. Tommy let out a ragged cry. Jack held his shoulders down. Teeth gritted. His shirt clung to him, soaked through, streaked with the boy's blood. Name? Eliza asked quickly. Tommy. Tommy Reeves, Jack said. Tommy, she said, loud and clear. I know it hurts. I know it's bad. But I need you to stay with me. Can you do that? Tommy groaned, eyes fluttering. Eliza didn't wait for a response. She pressed 2 fingers to his throat, pulse rapid and thready. He was going into shock. Her fingers moved quickly, assessing. The break was compound, splinters near the wound. Pressure had to be applied now. I need 4 to hold him, she called. Now. 3 men stepped forward, unsure. You. She pointed to the tallest. Hips. You. To the youngest, barely more than a boy ankle. Hold it straight when I tell you. The boy nodded, his mouth slack with fear. What's your name? She asked. Jake. Jake Morrison. Jake, you do exactly as I say. No jerking, no hesitation. Yes, Mom. Eliza felt the broken bone shift under her fingers. The memory of Boston hit her like a slap. Cold steel tables, gaslight overhead, screaming family in the hallway. She crushed it down. This wasn't Boston, this was now. On 3, she said. Jack braced himself. Jake swallowed. 1. She locked her fingers around the exposed shaft. 2. The crowd leaned in, breath held. 3. Jake pulled. Tommy screamed. A ragged, animal sound. Eliza pushed, aligning the bone ends in one steady motion. She felt them slide into place. Clean fast. Hold him. She didn't pause. She poured whiskey over the wound again, bits of grit sizzling on the surface. She used her forceps to pull 2 small wooden splinters from the edge, then needle, thread, clamp. Her hands a blur of memory and precision. Stitches tight and neat, wrap tie. Board secure. Someone in the crowd began to cry. When she looked up, Cook was kneeling beside another man, face lined with sweat, but his hands weren't shaking anymore. You kept him alive. Cook murmured, watching her. I'm not done. Eliza replied. She moved to the next man, head wound. Then another, broken wrist, bleeding arm. Laceration across a man's ribs that needed 12 stitches. She barked for more cloth, more water, sent boys running to fetch clean rags, turned the livery stable into a makeshift ward. She didn't stop, not to drink, not to rest. 3 hours passed, blood soaked her apron, her sleeves, her boots. The sun had begun to slide lower in the sky, shadows stretching longer, when she finally straightened her back and looked around. Half the town was watching her. Women with babies, miners with blood-smeared clothes, the sheriff, the barkeep, the pastor's widow. No one spoke. Doc Cook wiped his face with a shaking hand. She saved them. Someone whispered. She did what Mitchell couldn't tell. She's not just some male bride. Jack stood in the barn's wide doorway, arms crossed, sweat staining his shirt, his face unreadable. Marisol handed Eliza a clean rag. Breathe, she said simply. Eliza let out a slow breath. Then a new voice rang through the crowd, clipped, commanding. Before we start crowning her a hero. The crowd parted. Victor Langston stepped into the stable. He wore a black vest, gold watch chain glinting, boots polished, face hard. I want answers. Eliza wiped her hands on the cloth, straightened, and met his eyes. You say you're a doctor, he said. Do you have a license to practice in Texas? The words hit like a gunshot. A hush fell. She stood motionless, blood still drying on her gloves, her case open beside her like a confession. No, she said. I don't. Murmurs, shifting feet, Eyes narrowing, Langston stepped closer. "And you expect us to trust you with our sons?" She looked him dead in the eye. "You watched me save them." Langston's lip curled. "Why don't you have a license, Miss Merritt?" "My name is Dr. Eliza Merritt," she said. "I earned my degree in Boston. Practiced there. A woman died on my table because she waited too long to come to me. Her husband blamed me, had money, pulled strings. The board revoked my license." "So you killed someone?" "No," she said, voice low and firm. "Sometimes people die. Even when we do everything right." Cook stepped forward. "She did more good in 3 hours than I've done in 3 months. Langston turned to him. "You're the doctor. You won't allow this?" Cook raised his chin. "Without her, we'd be burying men tonight. I'll take the risk. She can work under my supervision." Langston's jaw worked. He looked at the men on the floor, the bloodied hands, the families whispering her name like a prayer. He turned, jaw tight, and stormed out. Only after he left did the tension break. Women rushed forward with clean blankets. Marisol brought her water. Doc Cook gave Eliza a slow nod, then slumped onto a hay bale. Eliza stood in the wreckage of a day that had stripped her clean. They'd seen her truth, but the price of it wasn't paid yet. She turned to Jack, expecting silence, but he stepped forward. "You saved Tommy." Her voice cracked. "Maybe longer." "I'm not talking about his leg." She blinked. He nodded once, and behind him, the church bell rang again, this time slower, measured. A warning, not from the mine, from the town itself. Jack saw the instruments. He saw her, and still, he stepped forward to help. The stable still reeked of blood and sweat. The hay was soaked through in places, blackened with what had poured out of men too broken to cry. Outside, dusk blotted into Saddle Ridge, and the sky turned the color of bruises. Eliza knelt beside Tommy Reeves, checking his pulse again. The boy was feverish, but alive. His leg, elevated and bound tight, hadn't started to swell more. Not yet. She smoothed the edge of the bandage and moved on. Across the room, Doc Cook was hunched over a basin, washing his hands slowly, methodically. His sleeves were rolled high, his collar dark with effort. He looked smaller now, less like the town's doctor and more like an aging man struggling to keep pace. "You should rest," Eliza said. "I'll rest when the dead stop knocking." Cook muttered, voice hoarse, "Or when my hands finally stop shaking." She walked over, wiping her own hands with a cloth that was more red than white now. "You did good work." He gave her a side look, wet hands trembling slightly over the basin. "No, I didn't. You did. I stood back and let you." "You stood back because you knew you needed to. That takes more guts than most doctors I've met." He didn't answer, just stared down at the water, like it held something he didn't want to say out loud. "Cook," she said gently, "what's going on with your hands?" He flexed them in the fading light. "Started 2 winters ago. Cold set in and they never stopped shaking after. Arthritis. Or both. Could be the drink. Could be time. Doesn't much matter now. You've been hiding it. Trying to. With simpler cases it was easy. But this..." He looked out over the injured men lining the stable floor. "This would have buried me. And them." Eliza leaned against the wall beside him. "You're not done," she said. "But maybe you don't have to carry it alone anymore." Cook gave a short, dry laugh. "You offering to be my second? I'm offering to be what the town needs," she said. "Even if they don't know it yet." He turned toward her. "You know Langston's going to push back. He's not used to being challenged, and he don't trust people who break the rules." "I didn't break them," she said. "They broke me." Cook nodded once. "Well, then it's time to unbreak what we can." He limped toward his satchel and fished out a flask, offered it to her. She shook her head. "Suit yourself," he said, and took a swig. They stayed like that, standing side by side, as the last rays of sunlight stretched long across the hay. By the time Eliza returned to her room, it was full dark. She stripped off her bloodied apron, peeled back her sleeves, and scrubbed her arms until the water turned pink. Then she sat at the small table by the window, still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. She'd done it. She hadn't run. She'd let the truth come out. And it hadn't destroyed her. Not yet. But the cost was circling. The next morning, Saddle Ridge didn't feel the same. People watched her differently now. Not with curiosity, but calculation. Eyes lingered longer, voices dropped lower when she passed. Some faces lit up, others stiffened. Every smile carried a weight behind it. Every silence, too. Jack found her outside the mercantile, staring at the broken fence-post someone had carved into during the night. It was just 3 slashes, nothing more. But the meaning was clear. "You shouldn't walk alone for a while," he said. "I'm not afraid of boys with penknives." "You should be," he said softly. "This town. It breaks the same way people do." Quiet at first. They stood in silence. Then he added, "You still comin' to the supper at Langston's?" "I need to," she said, "before the gossip gets bigger than me." Jack nodded. "Wear something light. It'll be warm." That night, she chose a dress in slate blue, plain, but well fitted. She kept her hair pinned up and neat, and her sleeves rolled to her wrists. When she met Jack outside the boarding house, he offered his arm. She hesitated, then took it. Victor Langston's house sat on the rise at the edge of town, overlooking Saddle Ridge like a judgment. The porch lights glowed amber. Horses were tied neatly out front. People were already gathering. Wives in pressed cotton, miners cleaned and trimmed, children chasing fireflies. They stepped onto the porch together. The murmur of conversation dipped as they entered. Langston stood in the center of the parlor, one hand around a whiskey glass, the other resting on the back of a leather chair. "Eliza," he said, "welcome." She met his gaze directly. "Evening." Langston's eyes drifted to Jack. "Good of you to bring her." "She doesn't need bringing," Jack said flatly. "She came on her own." Langston smiled. Then unreadable. Dinner passed in stages. Eliza ate sparingly, her mind elsewhere. People tried to be polite. Some genuinely thanked her. Others avoided her eyes. More than once, she caught Marisol watching from the corner of the room. Sharp, quiet, tracking every glance that passed Eliza's way. After dessert, Langston clinked his glass. "Before we disperse," he said smoothly, "I think it's right we address what's become a talking point in our town." The room stiffened. Eliza remained seated. Langston gestured to her. "Miss Merritt is clearly more than she appeared. A doctor trained, if not officially sanctioned by our state. And yet she saved lives. I watched it. So did many of you." Murmurs, nods. One man coughed into his napkin. Langston's tone shifted. "Still, we cannot overlook that she operates without a license. That creates risk." Jack asked. "Better survival. Off liability," Langston said. "Off oversight. Of setting a precedent." Doc Cook stood slowly. "She worked under me. Under my authority. You want to call that risk? Call it mine." Langston didn't flinch. Eliza rose. "You're not wrong, Mr. Langston," she said. "I'm not licensed in Texas. But I didn't hide my skills to deceive. I hid them to survive. Boston cast me out because I was inconvenient. Not because I was incompetent." Langston's jaw tightened. Someone at the back whispered, "She saved my brother." Another voicey, "My husband would have died without her." Langston raised a hand. "I'm not the law. I won't make this a trial. But I'll say this. Saddle Ridge needs to be careful who we call a savior. We've done that before, and paid for it." Eliza felt the floor shift slightly beneath her. Langston wouldn't forget this, and he wouldn't let it go. She left shortly after, walking with Jack in silence. At the bottom of the hill, he stopped. "You handled him. For now. He doesn't let things die." "I know." They paused. Then Jack said, "You don't have to keep proving yourself to me." "I'm not," she said quietly. "I'm trying to prove I still belong to myself." Behind them, the Langston house glowed like a lantern warning ships off a rocky shore. Eliza looked down at her hands, still sore, still raw. Cook's voice echoed in her mind. "You saved men today, Miss Merritt. But tomorrow you'll have to save yourself." The fever came in the night, not the kind that sent men to the mines with shaking hands, or the kind cured with bed rest and broth. This one burned fast, left skin hot to the touch, and eyes glassy with confusion, the kind Eliza had seen once before. In Boston, in the crowded tenements along the harbor, where rats outnumbered prayers. This time, it showed up in a miner named Caleb Finch, mid-30s, wary, strong. He stumbled into the clinic just after sundown, drenched in sweat, babbling about the sky falling and his teeth being stolen. Eliza laid him on the cot, and pressed the back of her hand to his cheek. Boiling. "What have you been doing?" she asked. "Work in the shaft all week," he slurred. "Then I bunked with the boys. We had whiskey, Mom. Just a little. Then my head," he shivered violently. A rash was already climbing across his chest. Red spots, clustered, angry. Eliza's blood turned cold. Typhus. She didn't say it aloud, not yet, but she stepped back from the cot slowly and exhaled through her teeth. "Marisol," she called. "We need to move him. Isolate him. Now." The woman appeared from the back room, carrying a bundle of clean linens. One look at Caleb and she froze. "Eliza," she said, voice low. "Is it?" "Yes." They exchanged no more words. The two of them had developed a rhythm now, wordless and fast. Caleb was moved to the rear storage room. The windows cracked. The door shut. Eliza doused the frame in vinegar and water. Then she burned the blanket he came in with. Within the hour, 3 more miners showed symptoms. By morning, it was 5. She paced the clinic like a commander in a trench, hands trembling not with fear, but fury. This wasn't supposed to happen here. Not this fast. Not after everything else. When she finally spoke, it was to Marisol, who was boiling rags over the small stove. "We have to shut the bunkhouses. Immediately. No one in, no one out. That won't go over quiet." Marisol warned. "I'm not asking for quiet." Eliza snapped. "I'm asking for clean." She stormed out before she said something worse. At the mine she found Langston mid-conversation with 2 foremen. They looked up when she approached. Covered in sweat and grime, Langston's brow arched. "Dr. Merritt, we've got typhus," she said without ceremony. 5 confirmed. 1 unconscious. 2 coughing blood. We have to lock the barracks down. Langston stared. "Impossible. I've seen it before." He frowned, folding his arms. "If we shut down the bunkhouses, half the men will scatter. The rest will panic. Work stops. The mine dies. If you don't, people die." "That sounds like fear-mongering." "That's medicine," she snapped, "and if you'd like, I can show you what it looks like when lungs fill with fluid and skin splits from the heat." Langston stepped closer. "This town is on edge. You come down here, shouting quarantine, burning blankets, and you'll start a riot." Eliza didn't blink. "Then you'd better stand behind me when I say it." "Because I'm saying it." Langston's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the foreman, who looked as pale as ghosts. "I'll call the council," he said at last. "You do that," she said, turning on her heel. By the time the council convened in the back of the saloon, word had already spread. Half the town knew something was wrong. The other half knew Eliza was behind it. They packed into the smoke, thick room with its warped floorboards and single hanging lamp. Langston sat at the head, flanked by 2 other men and Mrs. Connolly, who ran the boarding house and rarely spoke unless someone crossed her. Jack arrived late, dirt still on his boots. Eliza stood before them without notes, without pleasantries. "This is a typhus outbreak," she began. "We can't wish it away, and we can't ignore it. If we don't act now, it spreads fast." "Ugly?" Langston leaned forward. "And your plan? Quarantine the sick, evacuate the bunkhouses, burn contaminated bedding, sanitize everything. No shared water. No crowded meals. Screen every miner before each shift." "That's a lot of rules for people who don't like rules," muttered one of the councilmen. "Then they can bury their children instead." The room went still. Mrs. Connolly spoke softly. "How do you know it's typhus?" Eliza didn't flinch. "The rash. The fever. The transmission. I've seen it before. Boston, 1884. 37 dead in 6 days." Someone cursed under their breath. Langston cleared his throat. "We shut down the mine. People starve. We keep it running under control." Eliza countered. "Isolate the infected. Feed them separate. Mask those exposed. Burn what you can't clean. You'll need supplies." Jack said. "Blankets, buckets, food. I've already written a list." Langston looked around. His jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. "Finally," he said, "the mine will fund it." The room exhaled, but Langston wasn't done. He looked directly at Eliza. "You want trust, Dr. Merritt. Earn it. Contain this. Prove you're not just a lucky day in the dirt." She stared back. "I'm not here for your trust. I'm here for their lives." If she failed, they wouldn't just blame the disease. They'd blame her name. Marisol found her later, sitting on the steps behind the clinic, elbows on her knees, face streaked with sweat. "You held your ground," Marisol said. "Too many times, it cracks beneath me." Eliza whispered, "I keep wondering when it will again." Marisol sat beside her, peeling an apple with a small, curved knife. "I saw my mother survive things she never spoke of," she said, "but I knew them. In her eyes. In the way she never wasted salt." Eliza looked over. "Did she ever rest?" "Only when it rained," Marisol said. "Only when God said enough, louder than she ever could." Eliza let her head fall back against the wall, closed her eyes for a single breath. Then the door opened behind them. A boy stood there, no more than 10, holding his belly, face flushed with heat. "Eliza," he rasped, "my sister's burning up." Eliza was on her feet before the words finished. Then the fever came, and Saddle Ridge began to burn from the inside. The girl's name was Anna May, 6 years old, feverish, disoriented, crying for a mother too scared to enter the room. Eliza found her curled beneath a quilt on the floor of the family's small home behind the feed store. The room stank of vinegar and sweat. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes distant, her little dress clung to her, soaked with fever. The rash had bloomed, bright and angry across her chest, spreading like spilled ink. Eliza didn't speak at first. She just knelt and touched Anna May's wrist, counted the pulse, too fast. She checked her tongue, dry. The girl tried to say something, but her lips cracked mid-word. "How long?" Eliza asked the boy, who stood wringing his hands in the corner. "Since yesterday?" He whispered. "Mama said she just needed rest." "Where's your father?" "Died in the shaft last spring." Eliza didn't say anything, just nodded once and stood. "Take her brother outside," she told Marisol, who had followed her in. "Get them water. A lot of it. I'll need blankets, clean ones, and soap. Lie if they've got it." Marisol's face was pale, but she nodded and took the boy gently by the hand. Alone with Anna May, Eliza moved quickly. She peeled back the blankets, poured cool water into a bowl, and began to sponge the girl's forehead and chest. The heat came off her in waves, unnatural, wrong. She was losing fluids too fast. "This isn't fair," Eliza muttered under her breath. "You're a child. This shouldn't be your fight." Anna May didn't respond, but Eliza didn't stop. They moved Anna May to the newly established quarantine house. A shuttered church now cleared and sanitized. The pews pushed to the sides, the floor scrubbed raw. Eliza posted signs on the door herself, "No entry fever ward." By midday, there were 12 patients. By dusk, 17. Eliza drafted a full rotation. 3 volunteers at a time, masked and gloved with fabric soaked in vinegar. She trained them in sterilization with speed and precision. Marisol took over the food line, organizing deliveries in tin trays. No contact. The town's old laundry barn was converted into a washhouse for bedding, every surface scrubbed twice daily. Not everyone agreed with the plan. When Eliza ordered a pile of contaminated bedding to be burned, a group of miners' wives stood in front of the heap, protesting. "We don't have extra," one shouted. "That's our winter supply. You burn our blankets, you kill us come December." Eliza didn't blink. "This disease doesn't wait for winter. You either burn it now, or you bury your family later." Some still argued. But when Anna May's mother stepped out of the ward, weeping but alive, her hands red from scrubbing, people began to listen. By the end of the second day, the sick climbed to 24. Eliza worked without pause. Sleeps in snatches, meals skipped, eyes rimmed red from smoke and exhaustion. Her hands cracked from lye and water, but she kept going. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the girl, or worse. The future rows of graves on the hill, fresh and unmarked, at the edge of the ward. Jack showed up carrying firewood and 2 sacks of barley. "You're not eating," he said. "No time. You'll fall." "Not before I make sure they don't." Jack set the wood down and studied her. "You always this stubborn?" "Only when I'm right." He looked away, then back. "You shouldn't be the only one in that room. I'll go in." "No," she said quickly. "You're not trained. I don't need training to hold a bucket or a hand." Eliza hesitated, then nodded once. Inside the ward, Jack took up post near Caleb Finch, one of the first infected. The man coughed weakly, but he'd survived the worst. Barely. Jack sat beside him for an hour, dabbing his brow. Saying nothing outside, Marisol approached Eliza. "There's trouble," she said quietly. They walked together to the mine, where a group of men had gathered around Langston. Their voices rose as Eliza approached. "We're not wearing those damn rags over our mouths! She's ain't a prison. She's not even licensed!" Langston raised his hand. Quieting them, "Gentlemen," he said, "I understand your concerns." Eliza stepped in without invitation. "This is not a request," she said. "You want to keep working. You follow the rules. Masks. Screening. Isolation." One of the men spat near her boots. "I don't take orders from women who lie about who they are. You took orders from me when your leg was bleeding into the dirt." She shot back. "You lived." Langston didn't speak, but he didn't stop her either after a beat. He said, "The mine will cover hazard pay for those who comply." That changed the mood. Enough for the moment. That night, Eliza sat on the church steps, her head in her hands. Her apron was soaked, her boots stained, every breath scraped against the back of her throat. Marisol handed her a cup of coffee. "You should sleep." "I can't." "You must." Eliza shook her head. "Not until it breaks." Marisol sat beside her. "You'll break first." Eliza didn't deny it. Just then, the back door creaked open. A young man staggered out, shirt-soaked, eyes wild. "Eliza!" he called. "The shopkeeper's wife. She's gone stiff!" Eliza was on her feet before the cup hit the ground. By the time she reached the woman, it was too late. Rigor had set in. Eliza closed her eyes, gritted her teeth, and whispered, "Damn it." Another loss. She knew what came next. Panic, doubt, and something far worse, blame. Back outside, Jack was waiting. He didn't speak. Eliza looked at him, then past him, toward the horizon, where the sun dipped low, and the shadows of Saddle Ridge grew long and sharp. Tomorrow, she'd have to address the council again. And this time, there might be fewer allies. But for now, she walked back into the ward and picked up a fresh basin, hands shaking, eyes burning. "You either burn it now, or you bury your family later. Eliza Merritt." The dead were wrapped in sheets and marked with chalk. Eliza watched as two men carried the bodies from the ward to the small field behind the church. It wasn't consecrated ground, but it would have to do, 5 in one day. She pressed her palm to her chest, trying to slow the thudding drumbeat inside it. Cook stood beside her, holding a worn notebook, marking names. His hands trembled just slightly now, but his voice was steady. "That makes 12 in total." He said, "Too many." Eliza murmured. She turned to see Anna May asleep, her fever finally broken, her breath slow and even. The child had made it through the night. A small win in a storm of losses. Marisol returned with a basket of fresh linens, her dress damp with sweat. "We're almost out of carbolic. 2 days, maybe." Eliza nodded. "I'll speak to Langston." Again. She found him in his office, sleeves rolled, collar open, poring over ledgers. He barely looked up when she entered. "We need more supplies. Disinfectants. Gauze. Half the town is using kerosene to clean wounds. It's a miracle no one's gone up in flames." Langston didn't answer immediately. He tapped his pen once, twice, then closed the ledger. "The trains are late. There's been flooding east of Abilene. Supply lines are jammed." Eliza's voice dropped. "People are dying. Children." Langston looked at her then. Really looked. "And if we ration what we've got, maybe we get through it." "No," she said. "Not maybe. We have to." He leaned back in his chair. "Then get me a solution. Not just a problem." The next morning, Eliza met with Marisol, Jack, and Cook at the clinic. "We'll make what we can ourselves," she said. "Vinegar and ash for surface wash. Boiled herbs for compresses. Jack, can you source more barrels?" He nodded. "I'll take the wagon out past Burnt Mesa. Old logging trail has wild yarrow. Might be something useful." Marisol, "Talk to the women. Start sewing masks again. We need 50 by sundown." They moved fast. The day turned into a blur of motion. Boiling, stitching, hauling. At one point, Eliza caught a glimpse of herself in a broken mirror nailed to the clinic wall. She looked like a ghost, pale, jaw tight, eyes sunken. That night, she found Jack in the stables, checking on the mules. He'd returned with more than herbs. 2 sacks of charcoal and a bundle of dried sage. He looked worn through. She stepped up beside him. "You didn't have to go that far. Didn't feel like I had a choice." "You always have a choice." Jack gave her a sidelong glance. "You don't, though. Do you?" Eliza didn't answer. She leaned against the stall door. the scent of hay and sweat oddly comforting. "This town is changing," she said, "but I don't know if it's healing. Some wounds never do." Jack said. "They just stop bleeding." He handed her a small tin from his saddlebag. "Found this too. Cayenne. For the compresses." She took it, touched by the thought. Before she could speak again, shouting erupted outside. They ran toward the church ward. A boy stood in the road, yelling, "They're trying to take her." Eliza pushed through the crowd gathering near the entrance. 2 men, miners from out east, stood facing Marisol. Between them was Anna May, clutching a rag doll. The girl was crying, breath hitching. "She's not sick anymore," one of the men said. "We're taking her back to her mama. She hasn't finished quarantine," Marisol said firmly. "She's clean! She's ours!" Eliza stepped forward. "You pull her out now, and every person she touches could get sick. You want to start this over again, from scratch." The taller man pointed a shaking hand. "You think you're God, deciding who lives and dies." "No," Eliza said, "but I've seen what happens when people act like God can't touch them." Jack moved between them, calm, solid. "Let the doctor speak." The crowd murmured. Some nodded, some didn't. The men backed off, but barely, eyes still hot with blame that night. Anna May wept quietly as Eliza sat beside her. "I miss my mama," she whispered. Eliza stroked her hair. "You'll see her soon. And when you do, you'll be strong enough to run right into her arms. Promise." Eliza's throat caught. "I promise." But not everyone would leave this place with their promises intact. Eliza stepped outside and looked up at the stars, still and cold. Beside her Marisol appeared, silent for a long moment. "They're starting to turn on you. Not just the sick. The town let them. If that's the price of doing right." Marisol shook her head. "The price ain't paid yet." Across the street, a window slammed shut, and a single word was painted across the clinic's door: Amar Dirar. "Some wounds never heal. They just stop bleeding. Jack Callahan." The word on the door stayed there until morning. Eliza didn't touch it. She stood before it at dawn, arms crossed, jaw locked tight. Amar Dirar. The paint was thick, uneven, done fast. By someone angry enough to act but too much a coward to sign their name. Jack stepped up behind her, carrying a bucket of water and a rag. "Want me to take it down?" "No," she said. "Not yet." He paused. "They'll see it." They already did. Marisol arrived minutes later, lips pursed when she saw the slur. "Cowards," she muttered. Eliza finally turned. "We scrub it when we earn back the town's trust. Not before?" That morning, a silence settled over Saddle Ridge, the kind that hangs after thunder. But before the storm rolls in, businesses stayed open, but no one lingered in the streets, eyes ducked or narrowed when Eliza passed. Word had spread. She kept her head high back in the ward. Caleb Finch was sitting up for the first time, his voice a rasp, but his mind clear. "I dreamt I was in a river," he told Eliza. "Cold one. But then something pulled me out." She adjusted his blanket. "You're not done swimming yet." By midday a new patient arrived, a woman, not local. She was brought in by a pair of ranchers who'd found her collapsed on the road east of town. Feverish, mumbling in broken Spanish, her clothes were torn, hands blistered. Eliza stepped close. The rash was there, different shape, same threat. "She's not from here," Marisol said, watching closely, her accent's northern Mexico. "She was headed toward us," Jack said. "But why?" The woman writhed, muttering a name. Gabino. Eliza took her hand. "We need to find out where she came from. If she brought this with her. It's already here." Marisol finished for her. Still, Eliza's gut twisted. This was different. The woman's fever was higher, the blisters deeper. She might have something else. She whispered, "Something worse." Jack's voice came from the doorway. "You're saying this outbreak didn't start here?" "No," Eliza said. "But if she's the vector, it changes the timeline. And the risk." They isolated her in a curtained cot at the far end of the ward. By nightfall, she was unconscious. Eliza sat in the corner, flipping through Cook's old medical ledger. Notes, symptoms, timelines, nothing matched exactly. She needed help. The thought made her stomach knot. Jack found her an hour later, still at the desk, her fingers pressed to her temples. "You're not sleeping," he said. "Can't afford to." "Neither can they. And yet here we are." She looked up. I need to telegraph Austin. Ask for medical aid. Labs, maybe someone who's seen a variant like this before. Jack didn't blink. That's admitting you can't handle it. It's admitting the truth. He nodded slowly. I'll ride to the station. No, I will. You stay here. Watch them. Eliza. I need to be seen. Out in the open. If people think I'm hiding, the word on that door becomes the only thing they believe. She left at first light, riding hard toward the relay station 6 miles west. The land rolled out before her, dry, golden sharp with mesquite. The wind pulled at her coat. For a few moments she was just a rider on a trail, not a doctor bearing the weight of a dying town. The station master was slow, grumbling, reluctant to let her use the key line. But when he saw the seal from Langston's mine, he stepped aside. She tapped out the message with practiced precision. URGNT plus CBY PAS very MLIPI PAS UIES RQS MDADA DRDs A MARIT Sidel Regi. She stared at the machine a moment longer, then added I can no have MD by TIS SB GAR 10 MME. The ride back was slower. Her body ached. Her eyes burned. When she reached town, it was nearing dusk. The clinic was quiet. Too quiet inside. Jack stood over a patient's cot, brows drawn. Marisol paced near the stove muttering. Eliza stepped in. What happened? Jack looked up. The woman. She died. Her breath caught. When? Maybe an hour ago. Jack nodded. Doc Cook checked her vitals, then collapsed. Eliza ran to the next room. Cook lay on a cot, pale, sweating, his breath shallow. She dropped to her knees beside him. What were you thinking? He smiled weakly. She was alone. Damn you. Eliza whispered. Cook's eyes opened just slightly. You sent for help. She nodded. He coughed. Because it's not just typhus, Eliza. I can feel it. I know. He tried to lift his hand. Don't let them forget me for this. You're not done, she said. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure. She sat with him long into the night, changing his cloths, watching the fever rise outside. The town watched her clinic like a lit match near a powder keg. And on the porch, Jack found a note nailed to the wood. HISOUS. Tomorrow, someone would try to prove it. You want trust, Dr. Merritt. Earn it. Victor Langston. Eliza was already awake when the first rock shattered the clinic window. The sound was sharp, immediate. Glass splintered across the examination table. She froze mid-bandage. Hand still pressed to Cook's arm, then moved quickly, shielding his face as shards landed across the floor. Outside, voices rose, angry, afraid. Eliza! Marisol called from the hallway. Don't go out there alone. But Eliza had already crossed the room. The door slammed open. 10 men stood at the bottom of the steps. Their faces were shadowed in the early morning haze. But the message was clear. One stepped forward. Merritt Boone, owner of the dry goods store. His wife still sick in the ward. This ends now. He barked. You ain't sheriff. You ain't God. You damn sure ain't welcome. She saved your wife, Jack said, stepping between them, or made her sick in the first place. Someone else muttered. Eliza kept her voice steady. You're scared. I understand that. But if you force me out now, you doom every person still fighting to live. Boone spat in the dirt. You think this town needs you more than it needs answers. The crowd murmured. Jack moved again, hand near his holster. You come any closer, you'll get more than answers. Eliza put a hand on his arm. I need to speak, she said quietly. He hesitated, then stepped back. She turned to the crowd. I'm not hiding. Ask me what you need to know. Boone scowled. You lied about who you were. You came here with a different name, no license, no past. I lost everything in Boston, she said. A patient died. Not because I was careless, but because I was a woman in a room full of men who wanted someone to blame. So you ran. I survived. And I kept surviving. And when this town started to fall apart, I didn't run again. I stayed. I fought for you. She brought this on us? Another man shouted. That woman. Mexican, fevered. She brought death, and this one opened the door. Marisol stepped forward. She was a human being. She was a spark. And this doctor is the match. Jack's voice cut through the noise. You want her gone, you go through me. Langston's voice rose from the back. Nof. The crowd parted as he stepped forward. His boots struck the dirt like iron. She's rough, I'll grant you. She's hidden things. But I've watched 23 men leave that ward alive because of her hands. He turned to Boone. Can you say the same? Silence, then murmurs. Langston faced Eliza. You're not perfect. But you're what we have. You want to stay, you stay. But you do it all the way. No more secrets. Eliza nodded. If they knew everything, they might still turn. But now they would see her for who she really was, inside. Cook stirred. Eliza rushed to his side. His eyes fluttered open. Did they burn the place down yet? He rasped. Not today, she said, brushing his brow. He smiled faintly. I always figured if I died, it'd be drunk in a barn. Not like this, not clean. You're not dying. You're a terrible liar. He coughed hard, then grabbed her hand. Whatever this is, it's not just infection. There's something wrong. Deep. He tried to lift his other hand, but his fingers barely moved. It's like it's crawling through my nerves. Eliza looked down, and saw it, a patch of skin along his forearm, dark, spreading, not rash, not bruising, necrosis. Her breath caught. We have to cut it, she whispered, fast. Marisol stared. You can't. We don't? He dies before sundown. They prepped the room in silence. Jack helped secure the straps. Cook never flinched. Make it quick, he said. Eliza didn't look at him when she replied. I always do. The saw was sharp, but not sharp enough. The bone splintered midway, and Cook's scream was a sound Eliza would carry for years. But when it was done, he was still breathing. She wrapped the stump tight, then sat back drenched in sweat. Marisol handed her a rag. You saved him. For now. That night Eliza sat on the porch alone. The word on the door was gone. Someone had scrubbed it away while she worked. She stared at the blank wood, not forgiven, but maybe. No longer condemned. From the darkness behind her, Jack spoke. They sent a reply. From Austin. She turned. He held out the telegram. She read it once, then again. Her face went still. They're sending someone, she whispered. Jack frowned. Help. Eliza shook her head. No, an inspector. You're not perfect. But you're what we have. Victor Langston. Eliza didn't sleep that night. She sat beside Cook's cot, watching the rise and fall of his breath, the faint twitch of pain across his brow, the stump of his arm wrapped tight and clean. Outside, the clinic was still, too still, like the town was holding its breath. The telegram lay on the desk, weighted down by her father's watch. Astata medical bore MVO ERID Arvel Itine 48 HRSE or IZ to Envious to ID Lessensure and Pirashitisis Astian OFIC authorized. Investigate. The words carried a sharpness that years of hard work couldn't dull. No one from the board would come all this way unless they already had cause. Marisol brought coffee at dawn. She didn't ask if Eliza had read the message. She just set down the mug and leaned against the doorframe. They won't care what you've done here, she said. Only what you were before. Eliza nodded. Then I'll show them both. By noon, word had spread. People came in waves, some offering support, others wanting answers, a few just to gawk. Boone kept his distance but watched from across the street, arms folded tight. Langston arrived near sundown. You've got about a day, he said, voice low. I've arranged quarters for whoever they send at the boarding house. Don't know if that buys you favor or paints a bigger target on your back. Doesn't matter, Eliza said. We keep treating the sick. He hesitated. And if they revoke everything? Then I do what I've always done. Langston gave a dry smile. Lee through your teeth and save lives. Something like that. She spent the night preparing, charting symptoms, organizing notes, logging each intervention. Everything she could document, she did. Marisol helped, her handwriting neater. Jack restocked the quarantine room. No one spoke of what might come. They didn't have to. The inspector arrived the next morning. A man named Dr. Harold Keene, tall, gray-suited, with a starched collar that didn't quite fit his neck. He wore gloves, even inside, and carried a black case heavier than it looked. Dr. Merritt, he said, stepping into the ward. Or would you prefer Miss? Eliza extended her hand. Doctor. He didn't shake it. Let's begin, then. Keene moved like a man who expected the world to slow for him. He examined the clinic room by room, occasionally asking questions, but rarely looking at Eliza when he spoke. Your sterilization methods. Boiled water. Vinegar, soaked cloths. Carbolic acid when available. Availability determined by. Langston's supply routes. He made a note. And who authorizes patient intake? I do. And you are currently practicing medicine without an active license recognized by the state of Texas. Eliza's jaw tightened. Wes, Keene clicked his pen, noted. He interviewed Cook, who managed a few dry jokes, then passed out mid-sentence. Keene observed, unmoved. Neurological degradation. He muttered. Suggests advanced sepsis or something atypical. That woman. Eliza said. The one from Mexico. She had similar symptoms. Keene arched a brow. Did you isolate tissue samples? I haven't had the equipment. So no pathology, no lab, no microscope. Just me. Keene scribbled again. By afternoon, he sat in the small office and gestured for Eliza to join him. This isn't a formal hearing, he said. But the notes I take today will influence the board's decision. I understand. He removed a form from his case. You're accused of practicing medicine under false pretense, impersonating a licensed physician, and endangering public health by failing to report your status. I didn't impersonate anyone, she said. I am a physician. I earned that title, revoked after a fatality in Boston. A fatality caused by hospital negligence. I took the fall because I was the only woman in the room. Keene's expression didn't change, and instead of appealing, you fled. I survived. That's not a crime. It is when you cross state lines and set up practice without credentials. Eliza leaned forward. 29 patients survived under my care, including a child no one else would touch. Including a man whose arm I took off with a bone saw, because I didn't have time to wait for permission. Passion doesn't replace protocol. No, she said quietly, but protocol never saved a town. Keene closed the folder. I'll file my report by week's end. Until then, you're not to practice without oversight. And who's the oversight? May. That night, the fever surged again, 3 new cases, all children. One of them, Anna May's brother. Eliza didn't wait, she moved fast, checking temperatures, laying compresses, issuing instructions. Keene stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You're not cleared to act, he said. She didn't look at him. He's burning up. If we wait for clearance, he dies. I could have you arrested. Jack stepped between them. Then do it. But you'll have to finish the shift yourself. Keene hesitated. Marisol handed him a pair of gloves. We'll show you where the vinegar's kept. He didn't move. Hours passed. Anna May's brother stabilized by dawn. One of the other children didn't. Eliza sat with the mother, holding her hand as the little girl's breathing stopped. No words, just presence outside. Keene waited on the steps. He looked older in the morning light. I reviewed your logs, he said. You keep meticulous notes. Your treatments follow best practices under resource constraints. Not enough to pass inspection. No, he said. But maybe enough to earn reconsideration. She narrowed her eyes. You're offering leniency. I'm offering a chance. Submit a new petition, this time with testimonials, with evidence, with the names of every life you touched. Eliza looked past him, toward the church ward. That's not why I do this. But it's how you keep doing it. She'd have to choose, stay quiet and keep healing, or speak the truth and risk it all. Inside, the clinic hummed back to life. Outside, the town was stirring. Keene gathered his case. As he turned to go, he paused. You're not the story they told us. But you better be ready to prove it. Dr. Harold Keene. The bell over the church ward rang twice. It wasn't Sunday. Eliza dropped the chart she was holding and ran. Inside, Marisol stood frozen at the door. Cook leaned against a post, ghost, pale but conscious. Jack was already moving from bed to bed, pulling blankets back, checking pulses. 3 more patients had gone stiff overnight, jaw locked, eyes glassy. Anna May's brother was one of them. No warning. Marisol said, her voice thin. Hay was breathing fine last night. And now? Eliza bent to check his throat. No swelling, no bruising, just silence. She turned to Cook. How long has it been like this? Woke to the bell. 10 minutes, tops. Something changed. She muttered. Something broke loose. The fever wasn't just rising, it was accelerating. Jack moved to the back, opened the doors for more air. You said the Mexican woman had blisters. Yes. He pointed to the back wall, where a patch of mold spread thick across the wood. Eliza crossed the room. The spores were damp, clustered, dark green-black. Jesus. She breathed. That's not just mold. That's rot. Could that be it? Marisol asked. In the air. No, Eliza said, but she wasn't sure. Cook cleared his throat. I've seen this once before. Back in Tennessee prison camp, 1864, men dropped like flies. We thought it was dysentery, then typhoid, then both. What stopped it? We burned the camp. Eliza stiffened. That can't be the only answer. It was the only one we had. Outside, the wind picked up, dust spun down Main Street, a wagon rolled by, tarps tied tight over its load. The horses were jumpy. Langston arrived just before noon. You've got a problem, he said. Not bothering with pleasantries, we've had a problem. Eliza snapped. He dropped a ledger on the desk. Now it's worse. Inside were records, employee logs, names, dates. What am I looking at? Minors. Ones we sent west 2 weeks ago. All went through the church ward for routine checks. Half of them reported sick before they hit Dead Mule Ridge. One died en route. Eliza felt her blood turn cold. We didn't know. Eliza. Cook grunted. Now we do. Langston kept going. Neighboring towns are starting to hear rumors. If they close off the passes, we're cut off. Supplies, medicine, everything. We need to contain this, Eliza said. Now. Langston frowned. You talking curfew? I'm talking lockdown. Full. No in, no out. We shut the town down for 7 days. Minimum. People won't agree to that. Then we start with those who are sick. Secure the building. No exceptions. He looked at her hard. You're not in charge. No, she said. But I'm the one they'll bury first if this fails. Keene showed up late afternoon, dusty, silent, reading every room like a courtroom. Eliza pulled him aside. We have an environmental factor. Mold, airborne spores, possibly carrying or triggering the variant. Your proof. I need your microscope. He didn't respond, just opened his case. Together, they prepared a slide. Eliza adjusted the lens. What she saw made her go still. The spores weren't just organic. They were webbed, structured. Viral strands embedded in fungal tissue, hybridized. Keene peered in, his mouth set in a grim line. This isn't natural. No. It was altered. Or neglected until it evolved. He stood. Then you're not dealing with an outbreak. You're dealing with a weapon. Eliza's mind raced. This church, when was it last renovated? Jack stepped in. Not since the fire. 5 years ago. Fire? Kitchen blaze. They sealed the back walls but never gutted the interior. Just painted over the suit. Marisol's voice broke in. Which means the rot's been breeding behind those panels this whole time. Cook shook his head slowly. And every funeral. Every sermon. Every crowded Sunday morning they were breathing it in. Eliza turned to Keene. You said it yourself. Not natural, so report it. Get us federal containment. We need a cordon, and we need it now. He hesitated. You want the government here. I want this stopped. That night she met Jack behind the stables. Langston's on edge, he said. He won't hold the line if people start panicking. They're already panicking. I saw Boone talking to 2 of the ranchers. Whispering. Looking at the ward like it's a powder keg. She exhaled. If they come, we hold. And if the board revokes everything. Eliza looked up at the stars. Then I die doing the right thing. Tomorrow, she'd have to decide whether to burn the ward or let the sickness win. As they turned to leave, a single torch flickered near the edge of town. Then another, and another, figures gathering, watching, not speaking, just waiting. You're not dealing with an outbreak. You're dealing with a weapon. Dr. Harold Keene. The torches burned low, but the eyes behind them stayed sharp. Eliza watched from the clinic steps as the crowd formed. Quiet, unspeaking, full of tension not yet given a name. They stood like men before a hanging, waiting for someone else to say the words. Langston appeared beside her, shotgun across his chest, coat unbuttoned. They're not here to talk, he said. I'm not here to ask. Eliza replied. Boone stepped forward from the crowd. You were warned. The sickness started in there. Let it end in there. You mean burn it? Jack said, stepping out from the shadows. We mean cleanse it. Another man growled. Cook limped to the doorframe, pale but standing. If you light that match, you don't just kill the sick. You kill the cure. Marisol moved beside Eliza. Let them try. I've got kerosene of my own. Boone's jaw tightened. You draw on your own neighbors. No, Eliza said. "But I'll draw for my patients." The moment held, then Keen stepped between them all, raising both hands. "This is a federal matter now," he said. "I've wired for containment. If you obstruct that, it becomes criminal interference." A few of the townsfolk shifted. Boone didn't. "Too late. It's already out. You think the feds are gonna help us, or erase us?" Langston spoke then, his voice gravel. "You think this town survives if we tear ourselves apart?" Boone looked at him. "I think it's already dying." Langston raised the shotgun a little. "Then go home and pray it doesn't take you next." Boone held the stare, then backed down. The crowd broke apart slowly. One torch at a time vanished into the dark. Eliza's shoulders sagged once they were gone. "That won't hold forever," Marisol said. "I know." Back inside, Keen pulled her aside. "You meant what you said about the mold." "I did." He opened his case and took out a small metal vial. "Then it's time." Eliza narrowed her eyes. "Time for what?" "Sample burn. We test the spread, see how far it's embedded." She nodded. "Start with the back wall." Together, they cleared the room. Jack moved the patients. Marisol held the lantern. Keen dabbed alcohol along the wooden slats, then lit a long match. The fire took quick. Popping, hissing, alive with something almost wet. The smell that came off it made Eliza gag. "Rot," Keen muttered. "But something else." They doused it fast, leaving a blackened corner of wall, a gaping wound in the ward. Beneath the scorched boards, a nest of fibers wreathed. Organic but unnatural, like webbing soaked in bile. Keen stared. "We burn the building tomorrow." "Full cleans." Eliza's voice was hollow. "How many patients can we move in one night?" "Half," Marisol said. "Maybe." Eliza looked toward the door. "Then we start now." For the next 6 hours they worked, cot by cot. They moved the sick to Langston's old saloon, scrubbing it top to bottom, sealing windows with soaked cloth, boiling pot after pot of water. Cook oversaw from a chair. "Don't forget the north corner. Smells like piss and ghosts." Marisol cracked a smile. "That's just your coat." Dawn was breaking when they carried the last patient over. Eliza returned to the church alone. She stood in the middle of the ward, empty now, echoing. She saw flashes. Anna May smiling, Caleb coughing, the Mexican woman whispering in her fever. She reached into her bag and pulled out a single match, lit it, held it. The wood caught fast. She walked the flame to the blackened wall, then stepped back. The fire rose outside. Jack waited. She joined him, breath short. "You sure?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I won't let this town die in silence." The church burned clean. No one stopped it. No one cheered. They just watched, heads bowed, faces lit by orange. Langston approached as the steeple collapsed. "You just took away the only place this town ever agreed on." Eliza didn't look away. "Maybe now they'll agree on something better." Marisol stepped beside her. "Where do we bury the ashes?" "We don't," Eliza said. "We study them." She looked to Keen. "Still want me silenced?" He shook his head. Tomorrow, she'd speak the truth, in front of everyone, back at the clinic, turned saloon. Cook was propped up in bed, watching the flames flicker through the window. "You finally burned a church," he croaked. "Don't make it a habit," Eliza replied. He grinned. "No promises." Then his eyes closed. His chest didn't rise again. Eliza stood still, then knelt. She didn't cry, just whispered, "Thank you." Outside, the fire died down, and Saddle Ridge held its breath again. "Then we burn it down, and we build something no one has to lie to belong to." Eliza Merritt. The wind carried ash across Saddle Ridge for 2 days. Gray flakes settled on windowsills and water troughs, on porch rails and in open palms. No one swept them away. Folks moved quieter, slower. Grief and fire had a way of stripping things down to what mattered. Eliza stood in the old saloon, now converted fully into the new clinic. It smelled like pine soap and tobacco instead of sickness. The windows had been scrubbed until they let in full light. Every cot was spaced further apart. The shelves were full, the logs updated, the stove warm. She wasn't alone anymore. Marisol organized the medicine chest, muttering to herself about labels. Jack had built dividers for privacy. Langston dropped by twice a day with updates, looking older but lighter. Even Boone, silent and red-eyed, had left a sack of oranges on the porch without a note. There were no new cases. For the first time in weeks, Eliza let herself believe the worst might be over. At dusk, the town gathered by the charred skeleton of the church. There was no sermon, no hymns, just people standing shoulder to shoulder, holding lanterns. As the sun sank low, Eliza stepped forward. She held a small wooden box. Inside it, Cook's dog tags, his belt buckle, the silver harmonica he never quite learned to play. She set it down on the scorched earth. He wasn't a preacher, but he gave us faith, she said. Not in heaven. In a few heads bowed, then silence, then Langston. He spoke slow, rough. I fought for order my whole life. Rules, uniforms, clear lines. But when this town needed saving, it wasn't law that pulled us through. It was defiance. Eyes turned to Eliza. She cleared her throat. You all know who I am now. Not just the name I came with, but the one I lost. I was a doctor once. Then I wasn't. But titles don't stitch wounds. They don't lower fevers. Hands do. A murmur passed through the crowd. No arguments, no applause, just a shift, acceptance without permission. She looked out over them. We've all been something we regret. But none of that should stop us from being what's needed next. That night, she sat on the porch of the new clinic, lantern lit, ledger in her lap. Jack came by and handed her a folded paper. From Austin, he said. She opened it, her name, her record, a note scrawled beneath. Provisional reinstatement granted under emergency clause. Final review pending. She stared at the words for a long time, then folded it shut and placed it in the drawer. Marisol brought 2 mugs of coffee. You gonna frame that thing? No, Eliza said, sipping. I've already got what I need. A horse whinnied down the road somewhere. Someone was hammering wood. New beams for a chapel. Maybe the sound didn't hurt anymore. Jack leaned against the post. So what now? Eliza smiled, soft. Now we stay ready. And we stay human. The stars came out, one by one. Inside the clinic, a baby cried. Eliza stood up. She walked into the light.